which we are witnessing in terms of change in the last 9 years. Now, I have been a student all my life, and my professional life now, I think, goes back nearly 50 years. I joined the Foreign Service in 1974. So I have seen change take place from close quarters. And I also believe that when you are very close to something, you don't see the extent of change. Now, change has been taking place since 1947. Change has taken place between 1947 and 1974, when I had the privilege of joining as a civil servant. And change has taken place from there till 2014. But I can say with a degree of confidence that the change that we witnessed in foreign policy, in trade policy, and in the entire economic system and the new arrangements which are coming into being in the last 9 years has been somewhat extraordinary. Let me just start by sharing a few statistics with you, and then I have a few other points to make, and then I'd be happy to have a discussion. First of all, today in 2023, if you look at the surveys by the bank, the World Bank, if you look at the surveys by the IMF, they all describe India as the bright spot in the global economy. India will contribute 15% of global growth in 2023 as per the IMF. The rate of growth which is forecast for India in the fiscal year 23-24 is roughly ranging between 6.1% and 6.5%. The IMF says 6.1%, the World Bank says 6.3%, the RBI says 6.5%. By the end of 2023, India will be roughly a $3.8 trillion economy. In 2014, which I'm taking as a reference point because we are looking at 9 years of the Modi government, our GDP was a little over $2 trillion. And as is well known, we have moved from 2014, when we were the 10th largest economy in the world, to being the 5th largest economy in the world today, overtaking, by the way, the United Kingdom, which had 190 years of a particular kind of domination. But it's not the facts which are staring us in the face, but I think the confidence with which the Honorable Prime Minister stated, I think it was the opening of the ITPO, when he said that, and I was deeply, I was overcome with emotion. He said, by the time we finish our third term, or during our third term, we will be the third largest economy in the world. Now, for any head of state or government who is undertaking through his leadership one of the most fundamental transformations that any country can witness, I think speaks volumes both for the country and the leader who's leading that country. Why do I say that? Well, first and foremost, let's see very briefly the downward slide that we were subjected to from, say, 1700. In 1700, according to a Cambridge historian who I'm very fond of quoting, India's share of the world economy was 24.4%. India's share of the global GDP. And its share of globalized industrial output was about 25%. In 1950, immediately after we became an independent country, we had moved to our share of global GDP came down to 4.2%, and industrial output came down to 2%. That is what happened in those 190 years. Now, I want to fast forward. GDP in 2014 was 2.7 lakh crores, or around $20 billion. So, आपने 1947 के $20 billion से we are now moving up into moving in the direction of being the world's third largest economy. And again, I know some of my friends in the opposition, find it very difficult to reconcile with such figures. But if you look at the estimates of Ernst Young and others, they say by 2047, we will be a $26 trillion economy. Now, those are estimates. But one thing is very clear, and the purpose here is not to draw comparisons, because comparisons are always odious. But look, the fact of the matter is large parts of the world, including the United States, including parts of Western Europe, Japan, are witnessing growth rates in the close vicinity of 0.9%, 1% flat growth. And here even your detractors, if they may be called that, are talking about 6.1% to 6.5% of projected growth in 23-24. So, $5 trillion economy by 25 or 26, which people doubted, is looking at us. A $10 trillion economy by 2030 is again no longer a matter of debate or disagreement. And you are now looking between 2030 and 2040 at doubling that $10 trillion economy. Now, all my life, I've studied, as I said, continuity and change. And I see many of you around here who've looked at foreign policy and trade policy perhaps equally closely or more closely. There are two or three things I want to just mention. In 1947, when we became an independent country, we became part of a world whose agenda had already been established by others. The Bretton Woods institutions, I mean the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, had already been established. Why do I say that? You know, Bretton Woods is a sleepy place in New Hampshire where the talks took place on how the post-war architecture for governance would be established. And out of that came the IMF, the World Bank, and the GATT, because they could not agree on the International Trade Organization, because the US legislature didn't want sovereign decision-making authority to move from its legislature to a body of bureaucrats sitting wherever it was, ultimately in Geneva. So the GATT was created, General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. Now, if you look at the preamble of the GATT, it's very interesting. I looked at it just when I was preparing to meet all of you, and at the heart it says, entering into, 1 minute, I remember it by heart, but I want to quote it correctly. Yeah. The preamble of the GATT states that relations in the field of trade and economic endeavor should be conducted with a view to raising standards of living, ensuring full employment and a large and steadily growing volume of real income and effective demand, developing the full use of the resources of the world, and expanding the production and exchange of goods. This is the heart of foreign policy and trade policy. And I say this after 50 years of half a century of professional experience. This is the first time in my professional life I am seeing this actually implemented. Earlier, when I joined the Foreign Service in 1974, it was very fashionable for everyone to say, foreign policy also has economic content, which meant that you had a second secretary level or a first secretary level officer in a mission, I know KP is smiling, dealing with economic affairs, and the ambassador, if he had time from important political work, he would also devote his time to a little bit of economic diplomacy. Today, there is a fundamental reordering of that. Today, foreign policy, trade policy, domestic policy, all not only appears to be, but is being implemented with a view to benefiting the Indian citizen, India and the world. So I was just saying, what are we looking at here? Modi-led India brings growth, global goods and gratitude. Let me give you an example. When the Honourable Prime Minister travels outside, the Prime Minister of Australia, Albanese, calls him boss. The kind of respect with which he is received in Papua New Guinea by their Prime Minister, the Swabhiman, Seva, Vaccine Maitri. You see, at the end of the day, no matter which way you look at it, a leader and a country led by a leader with broad shoulders, a tall leader, will be judged not how the country fares in normal times, but how a country responds to challenges. And I believe that the pandemic challenge was once in a lifetime kind of challenge. Because I was, as I keep saying, I was in Geneva and New York heading the Indian missions to the UN when we dealt with SARS, Ebola, H1N1. But the pandemic which we had to face in the beginning of 2020 was more like the Spanish flu of 1918, resulting in devastation of an unprecedented order. And look what happened. Let me talk about the vaccine and the health sector part of it. When the pandemic broke out, our health sector did not even have the basics like PPE kits, oxygen masks, etc. We not only revamped that, a domestic vaccine production capacity in the public sector which existed in the previous years was dismantled between 2010 and 14. And from scratch, one, through a private sector research done in Oxford, AstraZeneca vaccine manufactured under license in Pune, and another purely domestic, and we were able to supply in excess of 224 crore doses of vaccine virtually free. And yesterday, I think 1 or 2 days ago, I heard somebody in the public recalling that Delhi has a population, I think of about 2 crores. UP has a population of 20 crores, and somebody in heading Delhi was intending for more oxygen than UP was intending. So, but forget about what we did inside, what we did for the rest of the world. 193 countries are there as per my recollection of UN ranking. I think we must have supplied vaccines either free or under preferential commercial rates to 120 countries or so. Now, a country which is able to do that domestically and then supply, so to me that is Seva, Vaccine Maitri, Sankalp. Now, the Honourable Prime Minister turned around the other day. One is that you can be content with your present, you can draw great satisfaction from the fact that you think you are doing well. But the other is to set yourself a challenge that 2047 तक एक विकसित देश बनना है. What does it take to be a विकसित देश? Obviously, I have a lot of material ready. What does financial inclusion means? What does digital inclusion means? Where are we taking this to? But today, I think no one is doubting the fact that well before 2047, we will have all the broad indices of a developed country. Now, I don't know about definitions, and I think definitions are often misleading, but you look at what the change in our domestic thing is. I can tell you, to be able to take the fruits of development to the most vulnerable sections of your society, I think that to me is the development part of it. And I was very happy to see some statistics the other day, and I'm very happy to honestly, admit to you that when the Millennium Development Goals were set up by the United Nations and which concluded in 2015, I used to say, as our ambassador in New York, that the MDGs will succeed largely because a large developing country was able to lift millions of people out of poverty. Another large developing country. I don't think they're so developing now. They're the world's second largest economy. But I can tell you, the Sustainable Development Goals or Agenda 2030 will succeed because India is succeeding. And I was very happy to see some indicators the other day when a report by Niti Aayog said that 135 million people exited multidimensional poverty between 2015-16 and 2019 and 21. This is the fastest decline in rural areas from 32.59% in 2015-16 to 19.28% in 2019-21. Reduction in urban areas from 8.65% to 5.27%. So if you can take people out of multidimensional poverty, they move into the middle class. When they move into the middle class, they are adding to an already large middle class base. When I have been saying for years that, India's success lies in the fact that you have a large domestic economy and the middle class and purchasing power. Now, I just go to a few. I can tell you about unemployment in India is below pre-pandemic levels, down from 7.2% in January 2020 to 6.5% in January 2023. Over 2 crore and 9 lakh youth between the ages of 18 and 23 have added to the EPFO since April 2020. You know what EPFO is? Employees Provident Fund Organization. And that's a measure you can't dispute because they've formally joined that economy. And look, coming to my two ministries and some of the things which really stand out. Let me start by the urban space. Between 2004 and 2014, the cumulative expenditure or spend on all urban schemes in which the government was a participant or government did some financing in those 10 years was 1,57,000 crores in 10 years. In the 9 years of the Modi government, and I'm talking essentially of schemes which began 1,57,000 crores. If you talk about the 9 years of the Modi government came into office in May 2014. The first year or so was taken in the conceptualization of the schemes. The schemes were all rolled out largely in June 2015. So in the 8 years of these schemes and the 9 years of the overall Modi government, our cumulative spend on the urban space through these programmatic intervention is close to 19 lakh crores. From 1,57,000 crores to 19 lakh crores. I'll give you some other statistics which should provide a picture of what is happening. Most countries in the world, including the larger economies, and I include particularly the larger economies, when they were faced with the challenge of the pandemic, there was a tendency in most of these countries for the governments, and because they had the economic wherewithal, the resources, to provide large stimulus packages. And these large stimulus packages meant that trillions of dollars of stimulus was injected into these economies. What it resulted in was that there was already some inflationary pressure. When the stimulus was injected, that inflationary pressure ended up becoming recessionary. I can share with you, even on record, that one of my first interactions with the head of a very large, perhaps the largest oil company in the world, it was in Summer Davos, was it? And he said, I was a newly appointed minister, a few months old, and we were talking about oil prices. The normal refrain from the producing countries is that, we don't determine prices. To which a student like me reacts by saying, if you don't determine prices, but you determine the amount of energy crude oil you release into the world market, that will determine prices. He said, well, we don't do it. I said, well, I just want to leave you with one thought. There's enough pressure, there's enough problem, there's enough waiting to go wrong. And I can make I don't call it a prophecy because that would be too strong a word coming from a civil servant turned minister. But I can tell you my understanding of the situation is that if you allow the prices to go up, you will face a situation, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, and the tipping point will come, the inflation will become recession, and the demand for energy will drop. And this is precisely what happened. I had a discussion with a gentleman a few months later. So how did you know? I said, I didn't know because I don't understand the situation. I'm a newcomer. I can see it happening. Today, I can tell you India's real energy growth in consumption is 3 times the world average. World energy demand is increasing by 1%. India's is increasing by 3%. How have we been able to manage this trilemma? One is availability, the second is affordability, and the third is sustainability. I can tell you with confidence that I have my ever diligent research team always gives these figures and in front of me. I'll tell you a very simple point. We have navigated our way through this global turbulence. By global turbulence, I mean the problems in the energy market were there already before February 2022 in terms of, the Russia-Ukraine crisis. We bought from wherever we could. We consumed 5 million barrels of crude oil in a day. We used to buy from 27 sources earlier. Today we buy from 39 countries. Our daily, rush at the petrol pumps is 6 crore. People go to the petrol pump every day to fill up. At no stage during the crisis of today has anyone ever seriously thought of. You might have a local issue in, in some area where some line has got disrupted. There was no shortage of energy anywhere. My oil companies give them full marks. Even when there were torrential rains in the northeast, they were able to supply gas cylinders by walking through water, by carrying the cylinders on their shoulders. How were we able to maintain affordability? Because the Prime Minister personally monitored the situation, and on 2 occasions, November 2021 and May 2022, he reduced the central excise on petrol and diesel. The reduction in central November 21 and May 22. He reduced the central excise on petrol and diesel by a significant part, 6 and 13 rupees, 13 and 16 rupees, and the BJP ruled states immediately reduced their VAT. Now this has resulted in a very interesting situation. The only parts of our political system which talk about high petrol and diesel prices are the ones who have not reduced their VAT. Let me give you 1 or 2 examples. I'm talking about the increase between June 21. I'm talking about the rate, first of all, petrol and diesel in July 23. Those are the latest figures because we are on 4th of August. In Guwahati, petrol retails at 98 rupees a litre. In nearby Kolkata, it retails at 106 rupees, difference of 8 rupees per litre. Now, it's not 8 rupees a litre. When you go to fill a tank, I don't know what kind of vehicles you drive, but some of your tanks are 40 litres, some are even bigger. So if it's an average of, say, 40 litres in a petrol tank, 40 into 8, in one go. So this is the difference between Bhopal and Amravati, between Lucknow and Bangalore, between Goa and Raipur. Let me take Goa, 97 rupees 68 paise, Raipur 102 rupees, difference of 4.77 rupees. Differences in all these, this thing is Gandhinagar and Jaipur, 12 rupees different. Gandhinagar, petrol retails at 96.63 rupees a litre, in Jaipur at 108 rupees 48 paise. 11 rupees 85 paisa difference. So if you multiply that by 40, and these are the only people who say that petrol price come karo, diesel price come karo. My first thing is that we are happy to look at it if international prices, but you know, we are dependent 80% for our consumption on imports. So the world price has some. But let me also come to world prices. Far-sighted, visionary and bold decision-making by the Prime Minister has maintained availability and affordability. Now we come to world market prices. Let's compare petrol increase and diesel increase between a 2-year period from June 21 to June 23. Now I will take 3 or 4 countries in our neighborhood, and then I will take a few of the larger economies. In the neighborhood, India's increase has been 2.36%. Pakistan's increase has been 50.83%. Bangladesh's increase has been 30.11%. Sri Lanka's 79.61%. This is petrol. Nepal's increase has been 42.39%. Now let me come to the larger economies. USA, during this 2-year period, increase in petrol prices has been 30.15%. 30% increase. In Canada, 24.17%. In Germany, 19.08%. France, 22.67%. This is petrol. I'll also go to diesel. Sri Lanka, the increase. In India, the increase has been 4.97%. Sri Lanka, the increase has been 130.65%. USA, 29.31%. I'm happy to make these statistics available to anyone who... No, we'll make them available. My press team will send them around, actually. Now, I want to say 2 things here. These reduction in excise duty by the Honorable Prime Minister was undertaken at a time when we were feeding 80 crore people 3 meals of dry ration a day, which, by the way, is still going on. Now, some people get up and say, "Arey, ye kya ho gaya? Wo kya ho gaya?" I was very disappointed. I mean, I was able to answer one start question, and I took my time on the Swanidhi scheme in the Lok Sabha yesterday. But there were questions on gas pricing, and I was very keen to answer those questions. Why? Because suddenly somebody turns around and says, "Bhai, gas cylinder bada mehenga ho gaya." Now, I don't know, correct me, I think in the last 1 year the price has gone up only once. Okay? Now, people don't realize that there's already a subsidy there. For instance, today in 2023, thanks to all the work done by the Modi government, and the Prime Minister is personally committed to this, the number of gas connections, I think, has gone up. I'm talking about LPG connections from 14 crores to something like 32 or 33 crores. And let me also mention to you that out of this 9 crores 60 lakhs are Ujjwala connections. 9 crores 60 lakh Ujjwala connection means this was a connection given free. During the pandemic, when there was a extreme vulnerability, the Honorable Prime Minister ordered that 3 free gas cylinders would be given to every beneficiary. I was just calculating, and even now, we are giving 200 rupees directly, DBT, to the account of the beneficiary. 9 crore 60 lakh people get this. All beneficiaries, all gas connections also get a freight subsidy. For instance, since we are again dependent for a large percentage on imports, you calculate the cost at the point of arrival, importation, then you take the distance. Now, whatever the going price is, if you have to takes more to take the cylinder, let's say in an extreme, remote, hilly area, there is another freight subsidy there also. So we are giving, even now, subsidy worth about 10,000 crores or thereabouts. How do I calculate this? Just to give you a very small figure. 9 crore 60 lakh Ujjwala subscribers. They are entitled to 12 cylinders a year. They don't draw 12 cylinders, they don't need to. But the Ujjwala per capita consumption has gone up from 3 cylinders to 3.71. Let's say on an average 4. So you take 9 crore 60 lakhs into 4 into 200. Should come to about 7,500 or so, I mean, depending on what the precise figures are. Plus you are adding another 1,000, 2,000 crores subsidy on freight. A question I am often asked, can't you bring the prices down? Look, we are import dependent. Certainly, the price of Saudi CP, that contract price, went up in 21, 22, 22, 23 from something like $380, $400 a metric ton to 700. And when it went up, but we didn't let the price of the thing go on, we didn't pass it on. Our companies ended up incurring a loss of 28,000 crores. We reimbursed them up to 22,000 crores. But we are happy to do that as long as the consumer benefits, and that was the Prime Minister's thing. I talked about Samparn to make India, I talked about Sankalp, Viksit Desh by 2047. Samparn committed to a healthy and fit world, yoga, millets. I hope you noticed that in that Punjabi meal there was a millet dish also. Okay. Suvidha, visa stamping. I mean, it was to be a nightmare earlier. Now issues are being resolved, including in the Honorable PM's recent visit. Suraksha, Operation Ganga, Operation Kaveri. I can't think of any other country in the world which deputed 4 cabinet ministers to bring back 25,000 Indian students stranded in Ukraine through 4 adjoining countries. I had the privilege of being. Samvad, Voice of the Global South. You know, India's hosted the Global South Summit, and even now, I think the Indian experience in any field, the health field, India's experience in the energy field. Sayog, a temple is being built in the UAE, and Samvedna. You know, people sometimes turn around and say your relations with a particular country are not that good, why do you come to their assistance? But that's not the issue. I think the humanitarian streak and the Prime Minister's policy, we are today a country which is capable of heavy lifting, and we showed that capacity for heavy lifting when an earthquake came in Turkey. You know, the Prime Minister was not, I think, in town. I think he was traveling. If I remember correctly, it was during the India Energy Week when the earthquake took place. And I remember wherever the Prime Minister was, somewhere outside Delhi, the instructions came before anyone. We were one of the first countries to send not just relief assistance, but sizable relief assistance, both in terms of helping at the local situation with, rescuing people, other relief supplies, etc. You know, I'm afraid I'm having to jump a little. Another thing which not many people realize, every government has good intentions. I have never taken the view that previous governments didn't have good intention. But you know, sometimes the way to, the way to hell is also paved with good intentions. You must have a vision for yourself, for your country, and your ability to take that forward. Let me give you, I joined the Foreign Service in 1974. One of my first assignments was, I was not even, I was a trainee. We'd come back after the foundation course. I was attached to the policy planning division with somebody I greatly admired, Mr. Damodaran, A.K. Damodaran. We used to call him Professor Damodaran, my friend Ramu's father. And I used to sit with the section there. I used to I was assigned. I asked the Joint Secretary, he was Joint Secretary. I said, sir, what can I do? He said, educate yourself on what happened in the OIC summit in Rabat in 1969. This is 1974. It was a very tough one. What happened by the way, many of you are so young that you don't remember what happened in 1969. But I can remind for you, we faced scorn in the international arena because at the summit where we sent a representative, India was left red-faced with having been forced to leave the OIC summit at the insistence of Pakistan, despite having been invited. Ek to aap invite na kariye. But he went there and Pakistan said, now how are you allowing this country in? You look at that and look at today. Look at the maturity, the intensity of your interaction with the Islamic world. I mean, I like to cite this, our relations with the UAE, what we've done on the trade front with the UAE, what we've done in terms of the India-UAE rupee settling agreement, our relations with with Saudi Arabia, our relations with Egypt, which is a traditional thing in the Islamic world. PM just went there on a highly successful visit. So, what used to happen then? But I'm not confined. I'm just giving you some anecdotes from my 50 years. So, whenever you face somebody like me, the old stories come out. But give you another example. I remember that when I was a young, director-level officer, the then Prime Minister, I think it was Sri Rajiv Gandhi, decided to establish at the 9th Non-Aligned Summit, which took place in Belgrade in 1989, it decided to establish a group called the Group of 15. What was this Group of 15? With the aim of cooperation amongst developing countries in the area of investment, trade and technology. And it was a middling group of countries that did not share much in common, hoping that they would collectively get the strength to engage as interlocutors of the developed world. 1989, not that far back. And the group aspired to talk to the West and present a united front for the developing world. Now, this is the kind of mindset you were in. Even 1980. What is it today? Today you chair the G20, the G7 is talking to you, you go and address the G7, that is the change. And that change, I respectfully submit to you, came after 2014. I can go into individual examples to say how, no. Let's say climate change. People talk about my urban infrastructure and it's fair enough. But today what you're facing is an total extinction of something called a climate skeptics. They used to say, climate change kuch nahi hai. But as you see the facts, the rainfall that you're getting is the highest in 50 years. The global warming is no longer the issue. It's global boiling now. Today you have a situation where, I believe that you guys have this tremendous power. Ek photograph ab laga dete, the narrative changes. I remember when we were on the Security Council, there was a body of a child washed ashore after the Syria conflict. Geeta, you'll remember that. That changed the global narrative on, the civil strife and conflict in Syria. Today, if you open the Western press, you have sights of parts of Greece burning and a child, half clothed, it's boiling there. You see reports from Vermont in the US. You see parts of Europe. Where was India on the climate this thing before Paris? Normal refrain was. I'm not saying we've gone away from the refrain totally. But I think the Honorable Prime Minister realized before Paris and then again before Glasgow that, it's all very well to say, this is not my problem, he has caused the problem, polluters pays principle, no, you, I mean KP, or the other guy, you caused the problem because you've done you have more consumption, you have more, you create more pollution, and the polluters pay principle. And you had the concept of common but differentiated responsibility. But nobody's running away from that. But the fact of the matter is, if a large country like India only identifies with one part, either you're part of the problem or part of the solution. The Prime Minister said, we will be part of the solution. Today, India is offering to the world in areas, now I could have an entire session on, what we've done in climate, but I'll take just one or two examples from my field. Today, you are offering solutions which were unthinkable. Look, I was in Geneva, I was posted to Brazil, and I was looking at what I wanted to do in Brazil. And one of the things which struck me was their great success in biofuels. And the government in Delhi then was also very keen. Mr. Sharad Pawar was Agriculture Minister, the then Prime Minister. We put in place a system, an ecosystem, whereby we would try and get 5% biofuel blending in 10 of our states and union territories. Only 5%. Idea was being, we'll get that ethanol, we'll mix it into petrol. We tried very hard. I was ambassador in Brazil till 2008, May. I went there in 2006, January. I left for New York in, I think, May. I left Delhi. I came back to Delhi in 2008. Forget it. Fast forward. Go to 2014. We ended the year 2014 with a new government with just 1.4% biofuel blending. So I said, sometimes your intentions are good. Many of the things that Modi ji has been able to do are not just because he thought of the idea. Some of these ideas are old ideas, but they could not implement their own ideas. We set ourselves a target after 2014 of 10% biofuel blending, and the target date was November 2022.